What's up guys, Tommy Bowyer here from Movie Rewind, and today I will be reviewing Doctor Who Series 2. There will be spoilers in this review, so without further ado, let's get into it. Doctor Who Series 2 stars David Tennant as the 10th incarnation of the Doctor and Billie Piper as his companion Rose Tyler. It aired from the 15th of April 2006 and concluded after 13 episodes on the 8th of July 2006. And from a personal level, Series 2 was the first full series of Doctor Who I saw live on air. I started watching Doctor Who near the end of Series 1, so Series 2 was a massive deal for me, and in retrospect, it was very risky to change the Doctor so early on in the series revival. However, under the brilliant and fantastic management of Russell T Davies as head writer and executive producer, they managed to pull it off, and Series 2 is now one of my personal favourites. As I have said before, there will be spoilers in this review, so if you don't want any of Series 2 spoiled for you, I would say go and watch it now, because it is a cracking piece of Doctor Who. Before we get into the episodes of Series 2, I would just like to give some initial thoughts on this series overall. Firstly, David Tennant as the 10th Doctor. He kills it from the first episode. A fantastic actor and such a brilliant incarnation of the Doctor. The 10th Doctor can be funny, he can be charismatic, he can be dark, he can be adventurous. There are so many layers to this incarnation which makes him so interesting. He's not one-dimensional, he's a three-dimensional character, and it works so well. Tennant is a fantastic actor and he kills it in the role of the 10th Doctor. Billie Piper as Rose Tyler. I like her in this series, however I preferred her in Series 1 for the simple reason the relationship between the 10th Doctor and Rose Tyler is basically one of a couple. They're flirting all the time, and honestly I don't mind it. I find it quite funny, it's cute sometimes, it gets to you. However, I think that is detrimental to Rose's character because she is constantly jealous of any woman the Doctor talks to, and that starts to get a little annoying because you're kind of like, Rose, please, just leave it alone. He's allowed to speak to other people. So that part of Rose's character I didn't really like in this series. She becomes a bit obsessed with the Doctor at some point, which I personally think is part of her story. However, yeah, it makes Rose a little unlikable a couple of times, and that goes for the Doctor and Rose's relationship as a whole. In the odd episode, it can be a little too cringy and cheesy. I'm alright with it most of the time, however, I do have to admit a couple of times it did get a bit, you know what, this is just a bit too cheesy for me now. The overall series story arc with Torchwood I think is done really well. Much like what they did with Bad Wolf, little hints of Torchwood's existence are sprinkled throughout this episode, so it makes you invested in every episode because you're trying to point out where references to Torchwood are, and I think it works really well. Series 2 is a fun and adventurous series. I think it works. A lot of the episodes are very well done. I would say that it's the 10th Doctor which makes this series because Tennant is just perfect in the role. Now that I've got the brief overview out of the way, I'm going to give a mini review of each episode which compose Series 2. Some very interesting episodes in this one. I'm really looking forward to reviewing them, so let's get on with it now. The Christmas Invasion was Russell T Davies' attempt to see how well the show would perform at Christmas, and with over 8.5 million viewers, it's fair to say that the BBC were impressed, and Doctor Who Christmas specials became an annual tradition for many years. Honestly, I think the Christmas Invasion is the best Christmas special Doctor Who has ever done, for the simple reason it's the most Christmassy. I like that it's set on Earth, it just has a heartwarming nature to it, and it's fun and exciting. It's not massive stakes or really depressing and emotional, and I think that's why I like it. It's just heartwarming fun, which is great to see around the festive season. And as a post-regeneration story, it is one of the best. For the main reason, the 10th Doctor does not appear a lot in this episode. It's a very Doctor-light episode, which I think is a great thing because it means that scenes involving the 10th Doctor really stand out because there's not many of them in this special. I like the fact that Rose is questioning whether the Doctor is actually any good anymore, because of course she's never been through a regeneration process before, so she doesn't know whether she can fully trust the Doctor or whether her relationship with the Doctor is ever going to be the same again. I really like the Sycorax as a villain. They have a great design and they provide a threat which you feel the Doctor would have to get involved in, so I really like the Sycorax. I like the presence of Harriet Jones in this special for the simple reason it highlights the differences between the 9th and 10th Doctor. One of my favourite scenes in this special is when the Doctor says to Harriet Jones, "I am a new man, you know, and you have to treat me as a new man." And I really like that because it also highlights the 10th Doctor's darker side, which we would see coming out a couple of times throughout his era. My favourite scene in this entire episode is the final battle scene between the 10th Doctor and the Sycorax King. I think that's amazing. It perfectly cements Tennant as the 10th Doctor. By the end of that fight, I was on board with this incarnation of the Doctor. So brilliant. This is a very heartwarming special. I think it's a great introduction to the 10th Doctor. It basically says who the 10th Doctor is and what he's going to be, and it's a very Christmassy episode, which I think is just brilliant. New Earth was a very disappointing series opener. And it hasn't changed on rewatch. While I enjoyed the Doctor and Rose's chemistry, it's obvious it's becoming a bit more romantic. The Plague and the Cats are not really impressive villains. They have good designs, but they just don't stand out as villains for me personally. Cassandra's return is okay, however I don't like when she's controlling the Doctor and Rose because it makes them really annoying and they feel out of character, and I think doing that so early on in the 10th Doctor's era was a mistake because he just feels out of character for some of the episode. Plus the ending to this episode is very stupid and very far-fetched. It doesn't make a lot of sense, to tell you the truth. Honestly, New Earth was just an average episode at best. As a series opener, it was very disappointing. Tooth and Claw was a significant step up from New Earth. I really enjoyed Tooth and Claw. It has a very tense horror atmosphere and I think that works really well. Having Queen Victoria there was a great choice because she's portrayed really well with a very layered performance, and honestly I would use that as an example of how to use a historical figure in Doctor Who without damaging that historical figure's reputation. It works really well what they do with Queen Victoria. The Wolf is a great villain. I used to have a little toy figure of the Wolf. I always found it quite scary as a kid, and it's still pretty creepy to this day, and I don't think the CGI looks that bad. I actually think it holds up pretty well. I just love this episode for its tense atmosphere. It has you on the edge of your seat throughout. Plus the Wolf kills, so it highlights that there are genuine stakes in this episode. So I've always loved Tooth and Claw. It's a very tense episode. I like the darker, more horror tone they have in the episode. Plus, the Wolf is a fantastic villain. School Reunion is an episode which is fantastic because of the performances of the cast involved. Elizabeth Sladen steals this episode as Sarah Jane Smith, and Anthony Head as the villain, Mr. Finch, is one of the best in Doctor Who's history. Such a chilling performance and a very memorable villain. The Krillitane as villains, I really enjoy. It's a great concept. The CGI is a little dodgy at times, however, I don't think it matters that much really. The Krillitane are still quite an intimidating villain, so I really like them in this. Sarah Jane Smith, amazing in School Reunion. I fell in love with her character after seeing this episode, and I loved the Sarah Jane adventures as well. So looking back, this episode is where it all began for the Sarah Jane adventures, and I really love it as a result. There's some great dialogue here between the Doctor and Rose as they contemplate the fact that he has to leave his companions behind because he won't die, he just regenerates, whereas companions die, so he has to leave them behind. I think that was a great scene, and it really highlights the fact that what the Doctor and Rose have cannot last forever. Very heartwarming ending when the Doctor says goodbye to Sarah Jane Smith. Honestly, I had a tear in my eye. I think it's such an emotional scene. It's also very heartwarming as well because you know that Sarah Jane finally had the opportunity to say a proper goodbye to the Doctor. The best scene in School Reunion is the scene between the Doctor and Finch in the swimming pool. It's an amazing scene. You can feel the tension in the air, and that's just an incredible scene. Really is worth the watch. I would recommend School Reunion to anyone who hasn't seen Doctor Who, because I think it's just a great episode to start off with, because it is so high standards. It shows what Doctor Who can do when it's on top form. The Girl in the Fireplace is made what it is because of Sophia Myles' talented performance as Madame de Pompadour. She shares incredible chemistry with the 10th Doctor, and honestly, if there was anyone I would ship with the 10th Doctor, it would be Madame de Pompadour, because I think they work really well together. For the episode in general, I like the concept of this episode and how it uses time travel. I think that's used very well. The Clockwork Men are a very scary villain. They're very intimidating and they stand out. I always enjoyed the Clockwork Men. When I was young, I used to find them quite scary, and they are still scary to this day. I will hold anyone to say that they are not. It's great to see Mickey join the TARDIS team. I think having him there means that Rose's attentions are not all fixated on flirting with the Doctor, so I think having Mickey there works quite well. It would be nice to see Mickey appear in more episodes of Series 2 as a regular companion. This episode is made because of the relationship between the Doctor and Madame de Pompadour, and it's such a heartbreaking ending when the Doctor doesn't get time to take Madame de Pompadour out to the stars. Him reading that letter, it's not said with any words from the Doctor, but you can see in his eyes that he was devastated. So that's something for Tennant's acting as well. He can sell a scene just by the way he looks. There has to be no dialogue involved. So that's a really heartbreaking ending for this one. Rise of the Cybermen, the first two-parter of Series 2. And it's fair to say I have mixed feelings about this two-parter. For the simple reason, when it was released, obviously because the Cybermen were returning, this was the one that everyone was hyped for. And on rewatch, I find it a bit of a letdown. The Cybermen have a very unique design, however I find them a bit too robotic for my liking. The Cybermen are of course human as well, whereas in this two-parter they kind of just feel like robots, which of course they're not, but that's what it comes across as because they have a robotic nature. So the Cybermen design is a bit of a letdown in this one. I like the concept of parallel worlds. I think that works really well. You can feel the emotion Rose feels knowing that her father is still alive in the parallel universe. It's great to see Mickey questioning his position in the TARDIS. He's basically saying, you know what, the Doctor and Rose are there. What am I? I feel like I'm just a third wheel. I think it's great to see Mickey finally starting to question whether he should be with Rose and in the TARDIS. You know, is he actually needed there? So I think it's great. The villain in this episode, apart from the Cybermen, their inventor, Lumic, he's okay. The problem is, I just keep thinking he's a lot like Davros, plus the overacting is a bit of a distraction. Someone should have told this guy to not go so over the top with his performance, because sometimes it can be a bit of a distraction. Overall, Rise of the Cybermen is an okay first part to a two-parter. However, as I said, I think it's the design of the Cybermen which lets this two-parter down overall. The Age of Steel. I always preferred the second part of this Cybermen two-parter compared to the first part, because I thought it was paced a lot better. It seemed a bit more exciting. I like that they give the Cybermen some development in this episode, especially the scene where the Doctor is talking to one of the Cybermen called Sally and basically letting her die with dignity. I think that's a great scene because it highlights that the Cybermen are not robots, they're actually people taken against their will and changed into Cybermen, so I think that's great. It's great to see Lumic get his comeuppance in this episode. He was quite an unlikable villain, so it's great to see him finally get his comeuppance. I really enjoy the ending to the Age of Steel. It's quite explosive, it adds some much needed excitement to this two-parter, plus Mickey's goodbye at the end of this episode. It was the right choice for Mickey to make. Not only can he be with his gran, however, he was never going to be equal in the TARDIS with the Doctor and Rose there, so it's great that he's finally decided it's time to leave Rose behind and move on with my life. And it's a very emotional goodbye actually. I was taken aback on rewatch how emotional his goodbye was. It just shows how much development Mickey has had since series 1. So I enjoy the Age of Steel. I think it's a lot more exciting than the Rise of the Cybermen, and I think it ends the two-parter in a good way. The Idiot's Lantern, as the name suggests, is one of the most idiotic episodes in Series 2. The Doctor and Rose are really cringy in this episode. This is the first episode where I found their constant flirting really annoying. The Wire is one of the weakest villains in New Who. Very annoying and just no real stakes. None of the side characters in this episode really stand out. Half of them aren't even very likeable. I suppose the concept of this episode with the Wire taking the souls of people watching the coronation is interesting, but it's just handled in a very boring way, and I can't stand Doctor Who when it's boring. So the Idiot's Lantern, there's not necessarily anything really wrong with it, but it's just boring. Nothing stands out in it. So a very, very weak episode. The Impossible Planet. The side characters in this episode are all likeable. They have clear character traits. The Ood are an incredible villain, very unique, one of the most unique in Doctor Who history, I would say. I like the setup with the black hole and the planet. I think it's a great mystery, and that's what keeps you intrigued during this episode, the mystery surrounding this planet and the black hole, because you know something is wrong here. You can sense it throughout the episode. There is some genuine scary moments in the Impossible Planet, which I really enjoy. Losing the TARDIS means that there feels like there's some genuine stakes here, because the Doctor and Rose can't escape from this planet. Plus, the cliffhanger to the Impossible Planet is so strong. Literally, I know what's going to happen, and I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for the next episode to start. And that is what a good two-parter should do. The first episode of a two-parter should get you intrigued in the mystery and have you on the edge of your seat, and that is what the Impossible Planet does really, really well. The Satan Pit has your heart racing and has you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. This is an amazing episode and a perfect example of how to do a darker Doctor Who story. I love the concept of this episode and how it tackles the ideas of religious beliefs. I was religious when I saw this episode, so I always found how they dealt with religion very interesting in this episode, because is there something before the universe, something that we don't quite understand? And I think that's handled really well. I love the Beast in this. The CGI holds up really well. I like the plot twist that Toby actually has the mind of the Beast. I think that's revealed really well, because it has you on your seat going, oh my god, Toby's the Beast. And they don't know. He's going to escape. It's such a great plot twist and it works really well. I like that we never actually know what the Beast was, what its origins were. There's some everlasting mystery to this episode, which I think is great, because sometimes you don't need to know everything. We never learn fully what the Beast was, and that's a great thing. That's okay. As I said, it leaves some everlasting mystery, which is very intriguing. My favourite scenes from this episode include the air vent scene when Rose and the crew are trying to attempt to escape the Ood. That's a very intense scene and has your heart pumping throughout. And also, another of my favourite scenes in this episode is when the Doctor contemplates whether to jump or not. It's great, because he has to completely remove what he believes in and has to put his faith in religion. And I think that's an amazing scene. It's very tense and I think it's handled really well. I love the Satan's Pit. It's a great end to a fantastic two-part, which I will actually say is my favourite two-parter in Doctor Who, because it's just done so well. Love and Monsters is a guilty pleasure of mine, because it's a very unique episode. I like the vlogging element to this episode. I think that works really well. And honestly, Elton and the rest of Linda are actually pretty likeable and have reasonable levels of chemistry. I find this episode pretty intriguing, the mystery surrounding the villain. However, the Absorbaloff, yeah, not one of the strongest villains, but hey, you know, it is unique. It does stand out, I suppose, maybe for the wrong reasons, but it's a very different approach to a villain, so you know what, you can kind of deal with it. It's a Doctor Light episode, and it is unique. There's nothing really quite like Love and Monsters, so you know what? I like Love and Monsters. There's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly innocent, and at some points it's actually quite enjoyable to watch. Fear Her is the weakest episode of Series 2, and honestly the first proper bad episode of Doctor Who, and even at the time of watching this episode I thought it was pretty bad. However, I think it has aged worse. The concept of the 2012 London Olympics was novel at the time. Now it feels a bit out of date. The acting in this episode I think is pretty poor. I don't think anyone's really on full energy in this episode. It just feels like a filler episode, really. The concept in this episode isn't very interesting. The villain is pretty bad. It's just a very boring episode. Nothing really happens in it. Plus, the ending is one of the most cheesiest I have ever seen, with the Doctor carrying the Olympic torch. It just feels like a massive anticlimax. To be honest, Fear Her just feels like they got to the end of the series and it's like, we just need a filler episode quick, and this was the best they could come up with. I've never been a fan of Fear Her. I think it's a really bad episode, to tell you the truth. Army of Ghosts is a great episode. It sets up an intriguing mystery when it comes to the ghosts. It finally tells us what the Torchwood Institute is. That's been teased throughout the series, so it's finally good to see that story arc kind of come to a head, as it were. Yvonne Hartman, who's in charge of Torchwood, she's actually a really interesting character. I would have loved to see more of her. It's great to see a female character standing up to the Doctor. I think that's done really well. Would have loved to have seen more of Yvonne Hartman. Jackie Tyler, for the first time I found her really funny in this episode. Now, she has been funny before, however I think in Army of Ghosts she gets more screen time, so she stands out more, and her funny moments, a bit of comedic relief, I think that works really well in an episode which is usually taken very seriously. The Cybermen returning, I think, is done well. It makes sense that they're trying to interfere with the Void, and the Cybermen come through from the parallel world. I think that's done really well. Plus, the Dalek cliffhanger is amazing. I remember watching it at the time and thinking, oh my god, the Daleks are back, and I was on the edge of my seat waiting for the next episode. So the fact that this episode not only has the Cybermen in it, but also brought back the Daleks, I think is amazing. So Army of Ghosts is great at setting up the series finale in a really good way. Doomsday is an intense series finale. It has you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. I love that the Daleks and Cybermen are both in this episode. Two of the most famous villains in an episode together makes this finale stand out. The dialogue between the Daleks and Cybermen when they confront each other is great. It's so funny. However, saying that, the actual battle scenes between the Daleks and Cybermen I feel could have been done a bit better, because even though we see them fighting, it does feel a bit weak at several points, so they could have done better with that. Bringing in the ideas of the parallel world again, I think is really good. It kind of makes this series connect together. The Doctor's solution to the problem, making the Daleks and Cybermen thrown into the Void, I think is great. It doesn't feel far-fetched in any way, and it rounds this series off in a great way. The Doctor being in his heroic fashion as usual. However, let's talk about the main element of this episode, which we all remember, Rose's departure. Now, when I saw this episode, I was in tears by the end of it, because I felt that the final conversation between the Doctor and Rose, when the Doctor finally says goodbye, I thought was so emotional, because I think everyone remembers their first Doctor, but not many people refer to their first companion. Now, even though I saw Series 1 near the end, Rose was my first companion. I had been with her throughout this journey with the Doctor, and the fact that she was leaving the series was very disheartening for me. And Doomsday handles that really well. You can feel the emotion between the Doctor and Rose, and in my personal opinion, Doomsday is the series finale I am most likely to cry over, because I just think it's so emotional and heartbreaking. I will always miss Rose. She was my first companion, and I don't think anyone will really replace her in that regard. So in conclusion, Doctor Who Series 2 is a brilliant series of Doctor Who. The main standout is David Tennant as the 10th Doctor. He proved early on in this series that he was the best man to take up the role of the Doctor, and it is the 10th Doctor which carries this series. Billie Piper as Rose Tyler is once again a fantastic character. I love the romantic chemistry between the 10th Doctor and Rose. I know not everyone likes it, however, what can I say? I grew up with this era and I'm always going to have a soft spot for it. There are some fantastic episodes throughout this series. Yes, there are some average ones, however, for the most part the strong episodes outweigh the average ones, and that is why Doctor Who Series 2 gets a well-deserved grade 2 ranking. I love Series 2. It will always have a special place in my heart as it is the first full series of Doctor Who I ever saw, plus the nostalgia when I see this series. Remembering fantastic times when I used to sit there, 5 years old, watching this series. I will never forget, and for that, Series 2 is one of the best. So thanks for watching, guys. I really do hope that you enjoyed my review of Doctor Who Series 2. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe in order to receive great and maybe even improved quality content in the future. And of course, what are your thoughts on Doctor Who Series 2? Please feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. And if you are waiting for my Doctor Who Series 3 review, that will be released by the end of October. So I hope you look forward to that, and I will see you in another one. See ya!